The moment the security guard reached for my company badge, I realized something far more valuable than my job was about to disappear from the people who had spent years taking me for granted. They believed they were removing another employee from the building, but they had no idea they were also walking away from the only person who truly understood the invisible system keeping their billion-dollar business alive, and within days, they would learn a lesson that no emergency meeting could erase. My name is Mason Carter, and until that unforgettable Tuesday morning, I was the senior infrastructure security engineer at one of the largest financial technology companies in Seattle called Northbridge Dynamics. For nearly 4 years, I had worked harder than anyone around me, protecting systems that processed millions of customer transactions every day. Yet the only time executives remembered my name was when they wanted another impossible problem solved before sunrise. The meeting lasted less than 10 minutes, but every second felt strangely peaceful, because I had already reached the point where disappointment no longer hurt me the way it once had. Across the polished conference table, Human Resources Director Linda Brooks calmly explained that the company had evidence suggesting I had been meeting with another technology firm after work, and according to their employment policy, they considered that enough reason to end my career without asking for my side of the story. Sitting beside her was Operations Vice President Derek Collins, a man who had happily accepted praise for projects that depended almost entirely on my work while rarely acknowledging my efforts in public meetings or executive reports. He folded his hands together, slid a termination packet toward me, and confidently announced that my employment was over immediately, expecting frustration, arguments, or desperate promises, but instead I quietly thanked them for making the decision easier than I ever imagined. Their expressions changed the moment I stood up without resistance, because calm acceptance was clearly not the reaction they had prepared themselves to handle during this meeting. I placed my identification badge on the table, wished everyone good luck with the future, and walked toward the door carrying nothing except my laptop bag, while deep inside, I felt years of pressure slowly lifting from my shoulders like a storm finally drifting beyond the horizon. A security officer quietly followed me through the office, while dozens of co-workers looked up from their desks, pretending to stay focused on their monitors even though curiosity filled the room like heavy fog before a storm. I packed a framed picture of my parents, a worn notebook filled with network diagrams that only made sense to me, and a coffee mug that had survived countless overnight emergencies, then walked out without looking back because I refused to give anyone
the satisfaction of seeing regret on my face. The elevator doors closed behind me, and for the first time in years I felt completely free from the endless cycle of midnight phone calls, weekend emergencies, and impossible deadlines that had quietly consumed every part of my personal life. Before I even reached my car, my phone vibrated with a message from Rachel Bennett, the Chief Information Security Officer at Summit Core Technologies, asking if I was still available for our afternoon meeting, and I smiled before replying that I could now accept their full-time opportunity without hesitation. My story with Northbridge Dynamics had started almost 4 years earlier when the company recruited me away from a smaller cybersecurity firm, promising an elite engineering team, cutting-edge technology, and a workplace where innovation would always be valued above politics. During my interviews, Chief Technology Officer Nathan Reynolds spoke passionately about building the strongest security department in the industry, and his confidence convinced me that I had finally found a company where talent would matter more than titles. The dream lasted only a few months before reality quietly replaced every promise because budget reductions eliminated the senior engineering positions. Another experienced teammate resigned for a better opportunity, and every request to refill those roles was delayed until the delays became permanent. Instead of managing a skilled group of specialists, I slowly became responsible for every critical security platform in the company, handling work that should have been divided among several experienced professionals while executives continued insisting that everything was only temporary. As each year passed, the systems became larger, customer traffic doubled, and cyber threats grew more sophisticated. Yet management celebrated rising profits while ignoring repeated warnings that our security operation depended almost entirely on one exhausted employee trying to hold everything together alone. I created detailed training plans, wrote hundreds of pages of technical documentation, and repeatedly asked leadership to let me prepare backup engineers. But every proposal disappeared into another meeting where compliments replaced action and empty promises took the place of meaningful support. Everything finally changed after a major cyber attack targeted one of our largest financial clients during a holiday weekend when most of the company was offline and unreachable. I spent nearly 3 straight days inside the operations center with little sleep, rebuilding damaged security layers, blocking the attackers, and restoring critical services before customers realized how close we had come to a disaster that could have destroyed the company's reputation. When the crisis ended, I expected leadership to understand how dangerously understaffed we had become, but instead, I received a small appreciation award, a short mention in the monthly company newsletter, and another speech about being an invaluable member of the organization. Watching executives congratulate themselves during the quarterly meeting while collecting enormous performance bonuses made me realize that my dedication had become something they expected rather than something they respected. A few weeks later, I requested one final meeting with the executive leadership team, determined to explain that our entire infrastructure depended on knowledge stored almost entirely inside my head, and that such a situation placed the company at serious risk every single day. I presented industry reports, staffing comparisons, maintenance schedules, and long-term forecasts, warning them that if I ever became unavailable for any reason, critical systems would begin failing one after another because nobody else had been given the opportunity to learn them properly. The room became uncomfortably quiet before the chief financial officer leaned back in his chair and suggested that better documentation would solve everything instead of hiring additional engineers or investing in proper training. I reminded everyone that I had already submitted hundreds of pages of documentation over the past 2 years and repeatedly requested formal training sessions, but those requests had been postponed so many times that even I had stopped believing their promises. I walked out of that meeting knowing my future could not remain tied to leaders who valued short-term savings more than long-term stability, and for the first time, I seriously considered finding a company where collaboration was more than a slogan printed on office walls. My physical health had declined from endless stress. My family barely saw me outside emergency calls, and deep inside I knew that if I stayed any longer, I would continue sacrificing everything for people who never intended to change. A month later, I attended a national cybersecurity summit in Denver after receiving an invitation to speak about building resilient digital defense systems, and standing on that stage reminded me why I had chosen this career in the first place. When my presentation ended, dozens of professionals asked thoughtful questions, but one conversation stood out because Olivia Grant, the director of cyber defense at Everpeak Solutions, listened carefully to every idea instead of waiting for her turn to speak. Olivia invited me to join her and several engineers for dinner, where the conversation focused on leadership, teamwork, and the importance of sharing knowledge so that no single employee ever became responsible for an entire organization. By the end of the evening, she admitted that her company was expanding rapidly and needed someone with my experience, adding that she believed great engineers deserved strong teams instead of impossible workloads. Over the following weeks, we stayed in touch through occasional video meetings, discussing security strategies in general terms while carefully avoiding confidential information about our employers because professional ethics mattered deeply to both of us. Eventually, she offered me a weekend consulting role that involved reviewing training materials and providing architectural feedback for future projects, and at confirming there would be no conflict with confidential company information. I accepted because it was the first time in years that someone genuinely respected my expertise. Working with Everpeak felt completely different from anything I had experienced because every meeting encouraged questions Every opinion received thoughtful discussion, and every accomplishment was shared across the entire team instead of being claimed by a single executive. Those weekends slowly reminded me that I was not exhausted because I disliked cybersecurity, but because I had spent years in an environment where dedication was rewarded with even more responsibility instead of appreciation. Everything changed on a quiet Thursday evening when I parked near Everpeak headquarters for another scheduled advisory session, completely unaware that someone from Northbridge Dynamics happened to recognize my car while driving through the area. By the following Tuesday morning, that simple misunderstanding had been transformed into accusations of disloyalty, an immediate termination meeting, and the decision that finally closed one chapter of my life while opening a far better one that none of my former managers could have imagined. The same afternoon I signed my employment agreement with Everpeak Solutions as their new Chief Infrastructure Security Manager, and the offer included a salary that was nearly 3 times higher than my previous position, along with a full engineering team ready to work beside me, instead of leaving me to carry every responsibility alone. As I walked through their bright headquarters, I was introduced to experienced specialists who welcomed new ideas, openly shared knowledge, and treated me like a respected professional rather than an emergency resource that existed only to solve impossible problems. While I was settling into my new office, my former employer was quietly experiencing the first signs of trouble because several automated security processes required weekly adjustments that only I had been performing after leadership ignored every request to train additional engineers. Those maintenance tasks had never been secret or hidden from anyone, but they demanded practical experience and teamwork that management had refused to invest in, allowing years of neglected planning to catch up with them all at once. By the middle of the week, my phone was overflowing with missed calls, urgent emails, and messages from executives who had never bothered to answer my concerns when I still worked for them. Yet now they desperately wanted me to return and repair the growing crisis before customers noticed the failures. I politely declined every request because I had already given them countless opportunities to prepare for this exact situation, and I understood that solving their problems again would only teach them that ignoring employees carried no lasting consequences. Several days later, the company publicly admitted to a major service disruption that damaged customer confidence, triggered internal investigations, and resulted in multiple senior executives losing their positions after the board concluded that years of poor leadership had created the disaster. Looking back, I felt no joy over their struggles because hard-working employees and loyal clients were also affected, but I finally understood that organizations become truly strong only when they value people, encourage teamwork, and never allow critical knowledge to rest on the shoulders of one exhausted individual. That experience changed my life forever, teaching me that self-respect is sometimes worth far more than a comfortable paycheck, because the right workplace will recognize your value before it is too late, while the wrong one may only appreciate you after you are gone. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.